Wyatt, thanks so much for that analysis. I guess as we transition to Assange, the Washington Post essentially called for you to be jailed for journalism. I was going to back end that in our discussion, but since you're here, any thoughts on the deal that Assange cut in light of the continued war on independent anti-war journalism?
Well, it's a huge victory for sure. We obviously don't know all of the details, but from the statements that we've seen from Assange's lawyers, there are no real restrictions on his journalistic activities going forward. I'm not totally clear on exactly the U.S. incentive here, the U.S. motivation to finally do the right thing after over a decade of people like us imploring them to do it. But regardless of the reasons, I think it's a wonderful thing that he can go home and hug his wife and his kids for the first time in years.
And in light of the attacks on you in the Grayzone, I mean, do you see this as a positive precedent, kind of a weakening of the attack on anti-war journalism?
I would hope so. I would hope that this is kind of the last kind of nail in the coffin of attempting to prosecute journalists with something as antiquated as the Espionage Act. But I'm always a little bit hesitant. There's always a part of me that wonders, well, if they're doing this, what is their end goal? And why didn't they do this 12 years ago? Why are they doing it right now? I'm sure you guys have some thoughts. So maybe leave it up to you to decipher.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Wyatt Reed, dear leader of the Grayzone, live from somewhere in southwestern Virginia. We'll see you soon.
Take care, guys.
Peace.
On the topic of Wyatt, I want to shout out Joseph Menn, author of the article, the hit piece on Wyatt in the Grayzone, because Joseph Menn's efforts have led to a huge fundraiser to fund Wyatt's work at the Grayzone. Everyone who contributed, thank you. And last time I checked, it was over $40,000, and for that we can thank Joseph Menn for his work on behalf of the Grayzone. Since what are
we?
47,000.
Yeah, we're less than 2,000 away. So thank you to everyone who contributed to the future of the Grayzone, to the future of Wyatt Reed, who has a target on his back, thanks to the three-letter agencies, along with the rest of us. The same Washington mafia that targeted Julian Assange. Thank you for helping to create the future of the position that you created for Wyatt Reed, completely independently. And yeah, help us meet our goal. It's right there on Spot Fund. Just look up We Fund the Grayzone on Spot Fund. That's spotfund.com.
And I just love the irony. Joseph Menn concocted a conspiracy theory that we're funded by Iran and Russia, which they had to retract because it's false. But in the process, he ended up actually raising money for the Grayzone, so inadvertently funding us as well. So I love that outcome, and I thank him for his efforts. But on the point that Wyatt raised about why is the government now allowing Julian Assange to walk free, it's really interesting. It's a great question. It's worth exploring. First of all, obviously, you have to celebrate a rare victory for humanity. It's actually some good news. I can't recall the last time on this show that we've talked about some actual good news, genuine good news, and this is it. So let's celebrate that. Acknowledge. I'm so happy for Julian Assange, his family, Stella Assange, who fought so hard for him. All of the supporters, the activists who go out every single week, small groups of people to keep Julian Assange's name on everyone's mind, because the corporate media, the establishment, want us to forget him, want us to leave him to rot in prison, which was their goal. But people around the world, led by Stella Assange and the Assange family, kept him on everyone's radar. And this victory goes to them. And why Biden and his DOJ ultimately dropped it, my speculation is, Ali Abunimah made this point, that there was a chance that the British High Court was going to actually side with Assange's final appeal, although a small chance. And the Biden administration couldn't take that risk. And Assange couldn't take the risk of not doing a plea deal because, of course, nothing is guaranteed if you're going through the court system. And also, I think, too, from the Biden from the Biden administration's point of view, if Assange had lost his appeal and if he had come to the U.S., that would have been really awkward and really embarrassing to be putting a publisher who's not even American on trial for the crime of journalism. And even though they can count on a reliable U.S. media class, some things are just too blatantly criminal to get away with. And I think they made that calculation that this was finally enough time, so we can finally let him go.
Yeah, that is one major, that is one of the best theories. I heard it put forward by Matt Kennard as well, who's been following his case really closely, that it'd be such an embarrassment for the US to have Julian Assange walk out, a free man, in the middle of London, to just walk out, bam.
Yeah.
And all his supporters greet him, and there's no espionage act. They don't get their pound of flesh. Just a total humiliation to the US national security state. So what they got was Julian Assange pleading guilty to possessing documents that harmed the national defense of the United States. I think that's almost the precise language contained in the guilty plea, which is disturbing. The Espionage Act, as Julian Assange said after being released, is obviously in conflict with the First Amendment, but it wasn't clear that a court was going to determine that. Another reason that he was let go, I think, or another real obvious reason why the U.S. had to cut a deal, was that their case was a complete disaster. It was a mess. Even though in Northern Virginia, in a federal court, the conviction rate is like 99.7% in these security cases, the jury would be stacked with national security people, like related people who live in Northern Virginia. The deck might have been stacked against him, but the case was a complete disaster. And one reason why it was such a disaster was because of what Mike Pompeo, who I see in the chat, he's coming up in the chat. Shout out to Big Mike. Is that his CIA ran one of the craziest operations to prevent Assange from getting diplomatic sanctuary from the Ecuadorian embassy in London, where he had been holed up. And in the documentation of that operation that was revealed through a Spanish court case, which I helped expose, which I can go into detail about, we learned that Mike Pompeo's CIA proposed poisoning Julian Assange, kidnapping him, possibly killing him through other means, and surveilled him to the point where they were conducting DNA tests on the diaper of a baby who they believed correctly was his child with Stella Assange, Stella Morris at the time, one part of his legal team. And that if he were to be returned to the U.S., as Assange's defense team argued in court, he did face the threat of execution, but certainly could not be guaranteed a free and fair trial. And I think that went into the thinking of the British court that ruled in favor of his appeal. And it also went into the thinking of the U.S. Justice Department, of the Biden administration, which likely, I believe, holds the Trump administration responsible for destroying the case or severely weakening the case against Julian Assange.
The only counter argument there, I think, would be that if you're the Biden administration, I think you could safely count on the judge agreeing to like bar any mention of the CIA operation. That happened in the British court. And I could see, you know, especially that judge, I forgot her name, Amy Berman Jackson, I think. I could see her siding with the government and saying that the CIA assassination plot is not relevant to this prosecution of Julian Assange. But at the same time, you're right, there was a risk of it coming out. So why take that chance? Because certainly Assange's defense would try to bring it out. And in fact, even if it was quashed, that would be really humiliating. People would have to acknowledge that the government is not allowing it in court, discussion of a plot by the same government against the defendant to murder him, poison him. So, yeah, I mean, listen, whatever the reason, I'm sure it was extremely cynical, calculating, nothing to do, of course, with principle, but it's something to celebrate. It's nice to have some good news.